Hi everyone, in this video we are going to talk about columns, these kind of like tealy things, okay, and why there's 12 of them, why sometimes you use 6, why you use a grid instead of columns, okay. It's all to do with responsive web design and things like breakpoints. Now, if that stuff is, if you're like, yeah, I'm a web designer, I understand that, this video is going to be quick and easy. If you're new to web design and UX design and you haven't experienced responsive web design and these columns before, I'm going to try my best to try and explain it all in one video. That's why this one's a teensy bit longer than the other ones, because there's a little bit of theory that goes on here. And I'm going to try my best to try and explain it all. I hope I do a good job. Let's get started. Oh yeah, go get a cup of tea, sit back. You might have to watch this one twice. I hope not. Yeah, let's get going. Okay, let's talk columns. It's easier to start with talking about columns on desktop and then we'll work on mobile. I find it easier to understand anyway. So what we're going to do, Artboard tool over here. We're going to pick a size for a website. These are really common ones in terms of the size for a desktop website. Google most common desktop or web browser size in the year that you're in, and it will come up. I'm going to pick 1920 here. This one's also another common one. Okay, 1920 is going to give me enough space to do my website. I'm going to drag it down here, okay, and I'm going to call this one my homepage. And we're going to have to develop a website or a desktop version of our mobile website, okay, as well, because it's going to be viewed on both of them. We're going to probably start with mobile first and design for that, and then look to do a desktop version afterwards. But in terms of the columns, let's start with this. So I got my desktop. I'm going to click on the name here. If you're unsure how I'm moving these around, I'm clicking on the name and dragging them, okay, just with the selection tool. Now to add the columns, okay, with it selected over here, there's this thing called grid. Can you turn this little tick on? There is either square or layout. Layout's what we want, okay, and it uses columns. It should default to 12. If it doesn't, use 12. Okay, and first of all, why are we using 12? The first reason is because everyone uses it, and that's as good enough a reason as any. If you decided you want to do columns of, 13, you'd be in trouble with a couple of people. Mainly your developer, because 13 is a weird number to divide things by. It's hard to divide in half, okay, as columns go. It's also, yeah, it's not divisible by lots. It's a funny old number. And the other reason is your developer is going to be mad. Mainly because a developer often is not going to be coding your website or your app completely from scratch. They're going to use some shortcuts or frameworks that already exist to speed up the workflow. And a lot of those frameworks will use things like a column, a pre-existing kind of column system, and it's probably going to be 12. Talk to your developer first, make sure that you're on the right track. Say, yeah, I'm kind of new to this. If I use a 12 column grid, is that going to be okay? Probably yes. The other reason it's really good is the same reason it is for when you're doing, say, magazine layout. Okay, it gives you consistency across pages. It means that things laid up on this page, when I jump to, say, my contact us page, everything is reshuffling. There's a bit of design consistency, a bit of flow through it all. Other reason is 12 is good and divisible. So let's say that, I'm going to make this page a bit longer. Let's say I'm going to rectangle tool, I'm going to mock up a really rudimentary website. So I've got my navigation bar along the top. I've got my kind of hero box along the top. I've got a bit of space to work from. So there's this big kind of like call to action, sale now on, check out our latest product kind of hero box here. And then on the bottom here, we've got our features box. And I'm going to design one that has, these are often called cards, like repeatable little units that you can use for like different products, maybe different services. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate them. So I've got 1, 2, 3. And you can see how 12 is a handy size. Okay, because it means that I can go full width. I can have 3 down the bottom here. Let's say if I need 4, what I can do is actually go just divide this 12. Here we go. And I can make 1, selecting both of them, holding down my Alt or Option key on a PC. Actually, that's the opposite. Alt on a PC and Option on a Mac. You can see how 12 is handy for this. I can say, here we go. You could do 2, you can do 1, you can't do 5. That is one of the drawbacks. You're like, I want 5 boxes, Dan. You can't. So that's why we have 12. It gets even better when we are doing what's called responsive web design, because we're going to have to figure out what this looks like on, say, mobile. Okay, and let's say we lay this out on mobile. Let's grab, we'll just do a new one. Let's do a new one. Go on. So a new artboard, we're going to make it make it the size that you're designing for. Okay, and on this one, let's say that I'm using 12 as well, because it uses the same framework. Doesn't matter if it's tablet or mobile or desktop. Okay, it's the same website that just responds to the size of the device. Okay, responsive design. And so let's say I've got 12. I'm going to get rid of my margins. That's the stuff on the edges here. I'm going to hit 0. And let's say I'm designing for it. So I've designed this site. What does it look like on mobile? Basically the same. Okay, so I've got my nav bar on the top here. I've got my hero box that's slightly different because we have so much space on the desktop version. I've got this huge big column wide padding. Whereas this one, I have to go full to the edges because we just don't have the size to play around with on mobile. And when we get down to these guys down the bottom here, there's no way that I can lay out 4 along the bottom. Okay, I could. Okay, the trouble is that they're just going to be too small, hard to read. Okay, so hard to read. There we go. Okay, so that's not going to work. So what often you'll do is you go, actually on mobile, we are going to get this box just to do something different. Instead of, instead of this box trying to go across 3 columns, we tell it in code to say, you don't have to worry about this, but it's an insight to the developer. You might already know a bit of coding, so this might be easy for you. But if not, your developer's going to go, okay, that box, instead of being 3 columns, is actually going to be, let's say, 6 columns. And he just has to change that in the code. On device called mobile, be 6 instead of 3. And it means that it's super easy to implement different design across different sizes. Okay, so you've decided that instead of 4 across, you've decided to do this kind of like 4 boxes, but stacked on top of each other. Or you might decide that actually you want them massive. Okay, and you're going to, well, massive on a mobile device, is you're going to just stack them all on top of each other, 4 of them. So the coder can go through and say, actually, that first box, you are actually the full width of 12. So what ends up happening though, while you're designing this kind of 12 column grid, even though it's being used, it's hard to design on top of because these columns are really small, and it can be really common just to say, I'm going to fake it and just write 6, even though 12 might be used. It's still, 6 goes into 12 twice, okay? Or it could be 4. Sometimes 4 is what gets used. Again, 4 is divisible by 12. Okay, so you might just design for 4, okay, just to make things, because you don't need that much detail when it gets to that. I often do it to 6. It's really common to do it to 4 as well. Up to you. Just as a little, we can't go too deep into what responsive design is, but let me give you a little kind of brief demo here. So this site here, HubSpot, they've got some really good resources here for web design and UX design. Okay, but this is their big website version. Okay, you'll notice that over here on the sides, okay, there's this big empty area. So the website actually only occupies this middle bit. So when we are designing on a desktop version, often, okay, you can see here by default, it's given me these extra margins here. Okay, you might decide that, you've also got these margins, or you might decide that you're designing for a really big screen. So I'm going to duplicate this. Okay, and I'm going to say I want the width to be a lot bigger. So instead of 1920, I'm going to make this say 2000. That's not really bigger. It felt bigger. 3000. Oh, 300. It's a bad day. Come on. We can do this, Dan. Come on. All right. Here we go, 3000. Okay, so you might decide to design for this really big screen because you've got a really big screen and your client does. Okay, but inside of here, you're going to have some really big margins either side. So you can actually design this website in here. Okay, so it actually stays inside this little bit. Okay, and you make it all fit within your 12 columns. But you can actually add some stuff in the background here. So in this case, they've got nothing much. This extends out, there's color, there's colored box. You might add some different graphics back here, but know that on some devices, they're only gonna see this version. So you might design for this version, okay, but keep this version here. That's why you have those margins on the edges here. So these margins here, you might just make a really big site, design inside your columns here, but be aware that something has to appear over here on really big screens. And it might just be an extension probably, or a background color, or some sort of repeat pattern or something. All right, so that's one thing. So when you're designing, design with a bit of margin on there. And when you're designing for tablet, let's say the designer for this HubSpot homepage here has had to design in XD, okay, the web page version, okay, the big version. the small version, and then watch what happens when I get down here. Oh, look at that. They've designed a version where on this size screen, that graphic just gets smaller and gets pushed off to the right. Down further, ooh, look at that. It went from being kind of website to assuming you're on some sort of tablet or mobile device. Can you see the big change? The menu was a big change. Look at that. Okay, so like really common to design a mobile version, a tablet version, and a desktop version. If you are working at a larger company, they might expect, like they're called breakpoints. They might be designing for 5 different sizes: teeny mobile, big mobile, tablet, small screen, big screen. You might have to talk to them about that, about what the developer wants from you. But the basic is just mobile and desktop, and leaving tablet out and letting it just assume it's going to be the website version. But that's for smaller jobs. Yeah. But if you are doing, a larger client with more demanding website, you might have to end up doing 5 breakpoints, 7. Hopefully not 7, but yeah, just so you know, we're designing 2 in this course. Okay, we're just going to do desktop and mobile. But there might be an expectation for tablet and bits in between as well. All right, other things we need to know about these columns is the space between them. Okay, the space between here is kind of up to you. Just so you know, a really common one. So these are the gutters, these are your margins, and these are your columns. So column width at the moment just expands to fit the space provided. You control the gutter and the margins, okay, and you just let the column fill up the space left behind. So it'd be really common to have a gutter width of 18. On a mobile device, it might be something more like a gutter width of 8. On a desktop, it could be 16, it could be 24. You're working in increments of 8. You'll just see that a lot in web design. There's a lot of increments of 8. So 8, 16, 24, 32. All right, and so it happens, okay? So 8 is another easily divisible number. And when we get into app design rather than mobile website design, it's quite a common grid size as well. So let's actually talk about that. So before we talk about app design sizes, I'm just going to I don't know. I've got a home page. It has got 12 columns. I'm using a gutter width of 16 or 24 or 8, whatever you want to use. Make it divisible by 8 to make things easier. And in terms of the margin, you've got to remember if you are using 140 from both sides, okay, so that's 280, you're taking off this. Okay, so actually designing, I can't do that math. 1920 minus 280. You can actually do math in these fields. You're actually designing a website for 1640. I'm going to undo. So that is that space in there, 1640. Does it say it anywhere? It doesn't. Okay, but you've minused the margin off both sides, so that's the size in the middle here. But don't get too hung up about the exact width, because we all know everyone's got different size computer screens, laptop screens, mobile devices. You can turn them on the side, portrait, landscape. Just get them kind of generic, and your developer will help with the whole responsiveness. Or you'll do it if you understand kind of basic responsive web design. Bit of CSS. If you are interested in doing that, maybe you're interested, and just even if you're not going to become a web developer, understanding some front-end web design is really handy as a UX designer, especially when designing web and mobile web. Okay, if you are interested in that, you might want to check out I've got courses on web design. Okay, there's a responsive web design course. Probably the best one is Visual Studio Code. Okay, there is Web Design Essentials. That'll get you through an understanding kind of the basics of web design. Yeah, handy. The last one I want to talk about is designing a mobile phone. Instead of designing a website, okay, a mobile website design, which we have, okay, which is a website that's just viewed on desktop, tablet, or mobile, we're actually designing an app. Okay, and what we want to do here is, instead of designing columns, okay, because it's not going to be responsive, it's going to be quite a fixed measurement, okay, either Android or iPhone, okay, and they use something differently. Instead of kind of things trying to respond, they use this very quite rigid square system, and they use 8 pixels as the square size. Okay, so use this to kind of space things out. Okay, space away from the sides, keep things apart from each other. That will be what your developer will be using, using the frameworks that they'll use for their mobile app design. Okay, so columns for websites, and this grid system for apps. A little bit more rigid and specific for app design. Holy smoke, was that useful? One last little thing is, let's say that I do make a new one. Okay, it's got this 4-column. You're like, I want this one. Okay, what you can do is you can select on this one, okay, and say, actually, I want to make it the default, and then click on this one and say use the default. Okay, so that's a way of kind of getting it onto multiple different artboards to make sure they're all the same. All right, that is it. That was a long one and a brain bender, I know. Yeah, hope it was useful. And let's get on to the next video. Hi there, my name is Dan Scott. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to go further with Adobe XD, I have a full course. There'll be a link in the description. It's called Adobe XD Essentials. There'll be a card up here you can click as well. But yeah, carry on with your day, enjoy, and I might see you in the full course.